in our introduction because sometimes that always
Okay.
happens.
Yes, it does.
So this podcast was started after years and years of people telling me, "Yo, you got to do the podcast. You got to do a podcast." Because I do a lot of public speaking in just locally in
Hmm.
San Diego. So just to give you a background, I grew. Oh, HU.
You know, I didn't know you. Are you HU? I didn't know that.
So I'm not HU. I'm from DC. So I have a I lived in Northwest Washington DC. So I grew up in DC. And so when I was younger, you know, in high school, we used to sneak to some HU parties.
Right. Of course. Of course.
And then so like I always wanted to go to HU, but you know, it just didn't happen for me. Um,
But I'm impressed. You know how many Howard people I'm like HU, and they're like, and I'm like, okay, did you go? I feel like you didn't actually go. If you don't even know how to do a throwback on that, because that's like almost like how you determine whether or not to take somebody's black card. It's the
I
same
know, right?
concept.
I know.
Hmm.
And so, like, I grew up in DC, like, when it was like DC was the murder capital. Like, it was just terrible.
Well, that's around the time I went to school there. So that's
Yeah,
started school there.
when it was Chocolate City, you go back now, it look more like a chocolate chip cookie.
It's not even, I tell people it's like used to be Chocolate City, then it went kind of like mocha, then a little latte, and then now it's just I don't know if there's any chocolate in it left, to be honest. I
Yeah,
mean, it's been pushed out and pushed out and pushed out. It's not for all the, yeah, it was a murder capital, but for all that was happening in DC on the negative side, there were so many positives, and that
yes,
was so influential to me to go somewhere. And like, I remember being in college, not just on Howard's campus, but even around DC, and I just never saw white people for
mm-hmm,
days. You know what I mean? And
mm-hmm,
I just felt like, you had a government that was so many cool programs that were created.
yeah,
So many people, so many, every doctor I went to, every dentist, lawyer, whatever, was black. And I just
mm-hmm,
think that the level of black excellence that was around you, and black entrepreneurship, more
mm-hmm,
importantly, was so like ingrained in me early on, but not even realizing the impact until you see it later,
yeah,
or
absolutely.
recognize that later, and see the stark difference.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. So, and I didn't, my dad had my biological dad growing up. So I was raised by my stepfather who's Nigerian. So I was influenced by not only Black American culture, but African
Hmm.
culture, and then African from the diaspora. I had Jamaicans in my community. I had Haitians. So I was drenched in a lot of Black and African culture. So
Hmm.
when I moved to San Diego, so I moved out here because I was getting in a lot of trouble over there. It was like
Hmm.
complete culture shock. I was like, oh my goodness, where is the Black
Hmm.
people?
Well, that was also very influential to me too, because I actually grew up in Maryland through elementary school,
uh,
but moved away and then came back and went, to go to Howard. And I remember like learning my first semester, I took a Black Diaspora class, but even just as I was starting that class, because I didn't even know what the word meant, at 17, right? Like, what does that even mean? But everywhere I went, people would either talk to me in Spanish, and I'm like, no, I don't speak
hmm
Spanish. And they're like, oh, you're
I
not
can see that.
Dominican? And I'm like, no. And then, it would be somebody, but there would be somebody who was black, right? And so I'm like, you speak Spanish? And they
hmm
would start explaining like their history, and you're like, what? Black people in the world speak Spanish? Then, my first boyfriend in college was Haitian, right? And so hearing
mm
him and his family talk in French, and I was like, like, what's the history with Haiti? Like, and so then taking that class at the same time of like, DC is like the entire globe in a bubble, right? Which is what I've always
Yeah.
loved about it, because of all the embassies and all of the, and to me, it's also, I think that's why I have a bit of a more sophisticated palate, because I've always loved food from around the world because of DC. You can get all of that there.
Ooh,
But anyway,
yes.
but the diaspora is such a powerful concept and term. And actually, I have had so many businesses that have the name Diaspora in it.
Really?
Hmm.
What do you think influenced that?
That first semester at Howard, and that realizing like how many like Black people are all over the world, and we've influenced it. And
Uh,
actually, like many entrepreneurs, you have ideas that are just too ahead of its time.
mm-hmm.
So before, travel noir and like Black travel has now become a thing. But
Yeah.
about 10 years ago, there was while I was in grad school at Howard, I got with a professor, a young brother who was a Black diaspora professor at Howard. And we were creating a show called Destination Diaspora. And it was
Mm-hmm.
about the influence. So basically, think about like the Rick Steves travel books and
Mm-hmm.
videos that you see on PBS and all of that other stuff. It was just like that, but from the lens of Black folks, because Rick Steves is always going to like Europe and talking about the history of Germany but
Mm-hmm.
nobody ever does that for like Black culture or
Yeah.
African culture around the world. And so the idea and concept of the show is that we would go to all of these different places around the world, and talk about how the African diaspora impacted that culture, from the food, the arts, the
Mm-hmm.
architecture, language, fill in the blank. So
Yeah, I
sometimes
love
I think
that.
we need to revive that concept, because I think now it's embraced, because everything is, people are embracing their Blackness now.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I started Black female founders,
Uh-huh.
people were like, putting Black in the name is that's a little too much. Like, people aren't ready for that, 5 years ago. But now Black is in everything, and people are all like empowered and excited, because
Yeah.
people would say, why don't you change it to brown? Or why don't you
Mm-hmm.
change it to this? And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm doing. Because I feel like in
Mm-hmm.
order to talk about Black folks, people always, we need to include every other minority. But when they do their stuff, or when they're empowering themselves or whatever, they're not including us. But why do
Mm-hmm.
we need to do that in order to validate or be seen?
Yeah.
Our um, our struggles and our needs and our culture. So anyway,
Yeah.
um, so,
It's funny you mentioned that because I don't know if you remember and I feel like we're coming back to the Black empowerment, but I feel like there was a period of time in our history and culture where everybody was rocking the HBCU shirts during the like during I think it was in the mid-90s when Martin was out, and we had all the
Different
Black
World,
Different World,
and
The
The
Rock,
Cosby Show,
Cosby, yeah.
Boomerang, still one of my favorite movies. Oh, and
Yeah.
do not forget School Days.
Yeah, and we was rocking the medallions, and then somewhere I don't know what happened. That culture went away, right? Like it just kind of just died. It was like, oh, like I'm not sure if media or what the powers that be said. Oh, this is too much Black empowerment, right? We want to
Mm-hmm.
nip this in the bud. Let's highlight gangster rap music and all this other stuff, and
I would
all
say
this
that's exactly what
conscious
happened.
all this conscious stuff. Let's make it not cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Well, as a
do
communication scientist and looking, somebody who studied media, that's exactly what happened. We started to have too many positive images, and media influences everything that we do. We don't even realize subconsciously. Like my mom just said to me the other day, how she's like, it's so great now. Every commercial you watch now has a Black person in it, where before you never saw that. But just like so many advertisers are changing that narrative, or there's a lot of interracial couples in the commercials now, and you've
mm-hmm,
just never seen that before.
mm-hmm,
And I remember it wasn't even that long ago, less than 5 years ago, I remember there was a Cheerios commercial that came out with a Black father and a white mom, and the little girl like pours the Cheerios like on her dad to help him while he's taking a nap, to help with his heart. And like social media like lost their mind, right?
mm-hmm,
About like, oh my God, and but now it's like, it's people have to see those things in order to like process that is actually what the world looks like. And you can't just continue to have commercials that just show white couples
mm-hmm,
using, doing everything, and thinking that, especially when so much of our culture is being appropriated each and every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I think that just for my mother in her 70s to kind of take note, like, wow, because they're sitting there, they're older,
Yeah.
watching TV all day long. I don't even know the last time I saw a commercial, but the point of it is that to notice a noticeable shift in commercials, I thought
Right.
that was pretty significant.
Right, which is this is a long introduction and segue. We'll see what we use from that. But so I can see me and you gonna have some great conversation today. So why I finally decided to do this podcast. So I did workforce development for a long period of time in HR, building youth programs, and then it went transition to like adult programs to really shifting D&I in the HR space in government. But during that journey of where I'm at today, 3 years ago I got a call from Google to help with a program called Startup Weekend with Techstars. And then they say, you know what, and we want to get more Black and people of color to this event, and we recognize you as somebody in your community that's really in tune with the community. Could you help us promote this event, get some more people of color, because they were on their D&I tip at that time. And I was like, all right, what is this? And I was like, okay, yeah, I could do that. And then they was like, you should join. I was like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur, and I'm not in the tech space. And they was like, oh, you more entrepreneurial than you know, because I developed a lot of different workforce development programs, which I didn't realize at the time is the same as building a startup, but I was just building it in the hub of another company.
Just so much of my work is people, including myself, I've been there, but teaching people to see that they are entrepreneurs, because that language, and I think that goes back to the imagery. We haven't seen it, and so we don't know how to apply that terminology and language to ourselves.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you built it. So you were an entrepreneur.
I was an entrepreneur. And then I got introduced to entrepreneurship, got introduced to angel investors for this software that we won the competition, long story short. And we were the most diverse team there. And then that's when, this 3-year journey that I'm still on, that's when the eye-opening came of, angel investors, venture capitalists, and all that stuff. And then and me being new to it, but understanding that the numbers, like 10% of my company for 400,000 just didn't seem right for me. And then navigating that world as a Black man, and I was like, all right, how come you gave Susie over here this deal and I'm getting this deal? Like, and try to navigate that's a whole new world. And then I there's things that I still don't know and I need, and I get that, but you trying to rake me over.
That's so common, right? That's still, even now in this day and age where people, I mean, just really in the last year, and, just like so much love and honoring to George Floyd, because he's unlocked his life has unlocked so many dollars, but it still pales in comparison, right? We still are not to the place and space of any sort of real reparations or real equitable access to capital.
Yeah, and then along the way, I met so many amazing people like yourself, just in this space, whether it's entrepreneurship, or just community developers that built these amazing programs. And I was like, man, this story needs to be told. This is like Black history in the making. And I realized it needed to be told even more, because from the adults that I've worked with in workforce development to the youth, we have such limiting beliefs about what we can do, what we are, and what we're able to do. And then when they see just one, there's like, oh, that's an anomaly, that person just got lucky and was able to do it. I was like, no, there's more of us out here. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna create this show to highlight more of us out here just doing amazing stuff, until every one of them believe that it's possible.
Well, and thank you for doing it, because even the episodes of yours that I've had an opportunity to listen to, because I rarely get time to listen the way that I would like, but I always find myself sharing them with other people, including my kids. Like, oh, you got to listen to this episode. You'll thank me later,
Yeah.
But it's very powerful, and to share these stories. Not enough of our stories are being told. So thank you for creating that space and holding space.
Yeah, no problem. So with that being said, welcome everybody to another episode of Risepreneurs. I know I'm a steal nuggets from that first bit, but I always like to hit record now because I get into such rich dialogues. Now I have Erin with me, and to begin the episode again, just in case I don't get the first part. For those of you, you're gonna know this just a little bit later, but I'm gonna do the HU.
You know.
And for my Howard University people, you already know what it is. So we got a great episode. Now, to begin us off with, I want to ask that introductory question. Who is Erin?
That is a great question. Who I am is ever evolving like everyone. But I think today, in 2021, I am a womanist. I'm an Afrofuturist. I am a mother. I am a community builder. And also, what I often tell people, I'm an advocate and an activist at the end of the day for the Black community. And specifically around our participation in the innovation economy and in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, because I think we are the hub of innovation economy, even though we don't get all our due credit. But that's another conversation of the story. Now, I've been hearing this term Afrofuturist. Break that down. What does that mean? What is an Afrofuturist?
Well, futurism in general is really about, and it kind of comes more out of like sci-fi, but it's really around just being focused on like the potential of what can be in the future. And it is captured a lot in creative spaces. So like Black Panther is all about Afrofuturism. The Afro piece is like applying that lens to Black culture and Black participation in the future. And a lot of Afrofuturists are really around making sure that we're included in the future and being advocates for that, whether it's capturing it in the arts and in creative spaces, but it's also around really our thinking specifically in the innovation economy, making sure that we are actually going to be thought about and included. Because what we've seen, and I think right now is a great example of it with the impact of COVID and that term digital divide that was really around in the late 90s and early 2000s around internet adoption, right? And whether or not people even had broadband access and so forth. It reared its head because how many children were impacted when their schools were not ready to shift to remote learning? How many kids didn't have laptops, right? But the same happened, not just, I mean, it's been highlighted a lot around education, but it's the same around workforce. How many people lost their jobs because their businesses, or their employers were not prepared, had not prepared their companies to fully be engaged and be touched by technology. Technology touches every aspect of our lives, and there's some organizations that are still slow to that adoption, which is unfortunate because at times like this, that is where we're seeing a whole huge impact on our economy, but more importantly, whole communities left out of it, right? And so you have, the statistics around how many children of color have not really learned in the last year is really sad. And I'm not laughing about it. It's just like, it's like, because it's funny, but just more like, I can't even believe that we're not out in the streets. And I think this is where, like, going back to like who I am and being, this town crier, this, as one dear friend has referred to me as like the Harriet Tubman of tech, because I've been doing this before it was cool and talking about our communities, trying to bring our communities along, follow the North Star into making sure that we're participating, we understand it, we have businesses, we own things within the innovation space. And innovation and tech are two different things, right? Yeah. And that sometimes those terms get used interchangeably, but tech is specifically all things technology, devices, software, what have you. But then the innovation is really just about doing something new, better, and efficiently. And oftentimes that efficiency is aligned or connected or utilizes technology in order for us to get there.
Yeah, and you probably would have helped more people if they knew they were slaves to outdated technology and processes and procedures.
So much so, right? Because some people are thinking, okay, well, I don't want robots to take my job. And that's a very real concern. But it's also about own the robots that are and create the robots that companies are hiring to automate systems, right? Own the technology. And in our community, we're just so used to having so much of our ideas, our products and services either completely stolen from us or undervalued, and just being an underestimated community.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, I'm gonna jump into your career here just a little bit because I don't really know how to define you other than a Renaissance woman, because I'm looking at your career. You went from adjunct professor to managing partner to VC to student success lead, angel investor, CEO. What can you not do, woman?
Well, you know what? There was an interesting TED Talk years ago about being a multi-potentialite, and I loved it because it was really around, who says that you have to pick one thing and be good at one thing. And I do remember when I was a kid, I had one of those books that you get to pick, like, what you want to be when you grow up, which now they say is like the worst question to ask children, but, studies show. But, and I remember I went down that list and I picked like literally almost everything, right? I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to own a business. Like I picked, I was like, oh, I want to do all these things. And so it was dismissed as a kid because it was like, you don't know what you want to do. You're all over the place. But what I realized is that I actually am all of those things in everything that I do. And all those things have come. I am a creative. I just create differently. I create in economic development. I create through business. I am a teacher because, well, one, I actually have been a professor, but I also teach and mentor with all of the work that I do is around bringing everybody along with me. It's not just by myself. I'm a communication scientist, and what that means, and is using looking at communications in the field of media and the impact that it has from our language to media imagery, everything, right? And the messages that it sends. And just, and I wanted to be a firefighter too. That was on the list. And I put out fires all the time. So really my background is, it's a long, windy road, but all of those skills are transferable. And, if you want me to talk about it, I'll tell you how we got here. But every single experience has shaped me for this moment and the moments that are to come.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about it in a different context. And then, what I liked, and this is just my own personal preference, because when you said teacher, what resonated with me is I feel teacher doesn't do you justice. I like to call you an educator, because I feel as an educator, no matter what space you're in, you're educated. Even in this conversation we had today, you've educated me on a couple different things. So I think you're just a natural born educator, and you bring that educational component to you, no matter what field that you're in or what room that you touch. I think somebody will leave away with a valuable lesson, nugget, or piece of knowledge or information if they're paying attention.
That's my hope.
So one thing I often tell clients, students, when I speak to them, is like it's not where you start, but it's about the journey and where you finish. And a lot of individuals have trouble with the start, and so I always like to hype my successful people where they started from. So, and a simple question is, what was your first job, and what was a valuable lesson that you learned from your first job?
Okay, so are we talking first like job as a kid, or are we
Uh-huh.
talking about first full-time job? Which one do you want?
Actually, let me give me both because I want people to see the journey. So give me the first one as a kid. What'd you learn, and then your first full time, W-2 job? Because I know sometimes the first job as a kid may not be that W-2 job.
Right. Well, and I won't go through every single one, but I I started working very early and realizing the power that I had with bringing skills. So my first real job, because I grew up in the era where there was like the babysitter clubs books, and
Mm-hmm.
so I was a babysitter slash pet sitter for neighbors. And I found that very empowering to just get paid to do something that I loved. I love kids. I love animals. And so, and to get that at like 10 and 12, like was super cool to me. But, and moving from that, my first like part-time job was actually, and I think really played a role in who I've become today. It was with Finger Hut. I don't know if you remember
Finger
Finger Hut.
Hut. What is that?
Yeah,
Is
Finger
that a
Hut, where
pizza
you
place?
no, it's a catalog where you order, things out of the
Oh,
catalog.
I remember
But I
Finger
was
Hut
like
now.
15 no, I think I was 16. I think you had to be 16. Somebody I knew worked there, and it was like good money. You could
Uh-huh.
start working there as early as like 15 or 16, but you go and you're basically doing telemarketing and
Uh-huh.
you're selling products over the phone. And like, let me tell you about this Tefal, pan set that we have. It's blue and it has da da da. And so I realized how good I was at sales.
Yeah,
And if
I
I can
saw
do
you.
it over the phone,
You was about to channel your telephone voice. I heard
I
it.
was right. I was about to get into it, right? It was about to get a little girl six on you. But anyway, but um, if I could sell something just by language, right? People didn't even know what I had. And I mean, the great thing about Finger Hut is you get it. And if you didn't like it, you could always send it back. But that didn't matter because I got that sale and that counted. And I was like the number one salesperson all the time, whatever shift I worked.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the people that worked with me hated me, but my family loved me because I'd win. There was always a prize per shift. So
Uh-huh.
whatever we were selling, oftentimes we would get to take that home. And I think I like stacked up my family's kitchen with all that cool stuff. But interestingly, I went to school. I went to Howard to be in broadcast journalism because I just knew I wanted to be like the next Connie Chung or the next Oprah or Kathy Hughes, because my understanding coming from, and I grew up in Minneapolis, went to high school in Minneapolis, as we talked about in um, the crack era of the day, and I really, the only radio station we had was a community radio,
Mm-hmm.
or black radio station we had was a community radio station. It
Mm-hmm.
really upset me because I could not listen to the music that I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't get the signal all the time. And so I realized, like, okay, I got to own it in order to like fix that problem. And like I started looking at ownership issues. And so as a kid though, right? But so to me, I thought I have to be the best journalist possible in order to own something, because that's what Oprah was doing at the
Yeah.
time. But I got into journalism and I realized that's not how it works at all, right? Those people work on the business side. They are, they understand advertising, much like, or exactly like the show Mad Men. Did you ever see
Mm-hmm.
that show?
Yeah, I seen that show.
Okay, that's exactly what that whole world is about, right? And it's just a bunch of ideas and selling it. And so I realized, like, going to work at TV stations and newspapers and so forth at the time, in the late '90s, mid to late '90s, all of the journalists were driving
Uh-huh.
hoopties, and all the salespeople and or the people, and like when I talked to the publishers and the GMs, they had all gone through the business side and they were like pulling up in Benzes and BMWs and so forth. And I was like, there's a power structure here, there's a power
Mm-hmm.
dynamic. And so I shifted my career at the very end of college into telecommunications management. I had an amazing professor who was one of the first Black general sales managers in the country, and I think it was in radio, if I remember correctly. And he just like blew my mind with the business structure of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so got into a coveted, it's my very first job. and it totally blew my family and everybody away because I had a number of offers to go into journalism and be on air or be a copy editor or whatever. But I was like, okay, I can be on air for $18,000 a year, you know, in the middle of nowhere of the country town. I can maybe make around $30,000 a year as a copy editor at a newspaper, but I'll have carpal tunnel by the time I'm 30. Or I can sell an intangible, which is airtime or whatever, and make six figures, right? That's what I'm going to do. And so ended up going to New York and getting into a very coveted training program, selling national advertising. And so it was a rep firm that had CBS radio at the time, Clear Channel Radio, ABC Radio, a lot of those different groups, and I was on the ABC radio team.
Nice. You know, so much of your journey, I resonate with it because I started out in radio as well, or trying to chase that radio dream. And after taking an internship, the radio station, the black radio station that I was working for, interning for, got bought out by Clear Channel. Clear Channel just started buying up everything. And then I saw although the structure with the dynamic shift, I saw that already, but it really changed once Clear Channel took it over, where, you know, like I was passionate about the art, the music. I wanted to connect with different artists, bring them on the shows and so forth. And we couldn't do that. We had to do whatever the upper boss said, like, this is going to be the formatting. This is what's going to be played. Like the DJs had no voice. They had no power. All the execs had the power. And the other part of the power was in sales and marketing, because they was bringing in the dollars. And so I switched my major to business marketing, because I was like, oh man, I can't. Nah, this is not what I wanted. So I resonate with everything you're saying, and it's so true.
You know, what's so funny is I just by accident jumped on like an Instagram live with one of my former, because later I ended up actually working at Clear Channel locally in Memphis, and then also in San Francisco. Radio. And I jumped on Instagram live with one of our talents, and we both went through really horrific experiences with Clear Channel due to consolidation, and they started gobbling up everything but cutting what they were paying their talent and also what they were paying their salespeople. Those margins kept getting smaller and smaller, and commission checks got smaller and smaller. But anyway, and actually my whole trajectory in life changed because I was working for Clear Channel in San Francisco, and on Barack's first inauguration, they made a decision that nobody, you know, the owners at the time, and I don't even think they were public at that time. They might have still been family owned, were, you know, they're from Texas, very conservative Republicans, and were hot to death. The economy was kind of shifting already. And so they made it mandatory that nobody could take off across the country to go to inauguration. You had to be there.
What?
And work. Yeah, you had to work that day. Oh, I was hot. But then what was worse about it, and so she and I were retelling this story to each other, but it was, we had to sit there in a conference room, at least in our market, and watch inauguration on TV, which was, you know, such a historical event. And, you know, I have two sons, right? So two Black boys who at the time were like under 7. And I really had wanted to go back to DC, although I hadn't lived in DC since graduating from Howard at that time. But it's the top of 2009. And they made us sit in a conference room, watch the inauguration, and then laid us off one by one. They hid a massive layoff across the country under the hype and the historical event that was that inauguration. And so thousands of people were laid off across the country, especially a lot of women and minorities. And it was one of the worst days of my life. But now I look back and I'm like, thank you, Clear Channel. Because if you hadn't done that, I would, because what I had then was a whole Legally Blonde moment, right? Where I was like, wait a minute, the companies that I pour all myself into and like do all this work for don't give a damn about me, right? That's one. Two, at the same time, I had been trying to get into tech from an employee standpoint, and those companies were like, oh, we don't. If you went to an HBCU, we rank those lower in our hiring practices and things like that. So, you know, I couldn't get a job in tech. I had tried to start a tech company while I was out in the Bay Area. Couldn't get into any of the programs, the Y Combinators and things that existed, you know, in the mid 2000s when there were very few programs. And I just said, you know what? Nobody is talking about women and minorities like in the innovation economy from a standpoint of workforce and employment, because if you get into those ecosystems, oftentimes founders of other tech companies used to work at other tech companies, right? And they get to know everybody, and so then they're kind of validated off of the companies that they work for, or in entrepreneurship. So I, had that moment. I mean, I joke because, Legally Blonde is kind of a funny movie, but it really is about like getting angry enough about something and doing something about it. And went back to DC to go to Howard for grad school to get into what was now, looking back, the early days of tech policy. But at the time, it was media ownership issues and new media policy work. And that really has shaped my career. So thank you, Clear Channel.
Yes, thank you, Clear Channel. Thank you, Clear Channel.
Now iHeartRadio or whatever. So people now are like, don't even know that background, because actually what you're talking about and what you were reading off is my background from 2009 on, when, at that point I was divorced with 2 young children. So, I'm a single mom, independent mom. I've gone from making 6 figures to having no money, which I had never done, and going on unemployment for the first time, and food stamps and so forth. And literally, packed up my Prius with garbage bags with our stuff, and drove me and a 7-year-old and an 18-month-old cross country by myself. That itself was an experience, from driving from California to DC, and learned so much about myself and that strength and that I had within me. But that shift socioeconomically, that shift in pivoting my career, because I never thought I'd go to grad school. I never thought I would do something different. But that experience made me realize, sometimes you just got to jump and you got to do it. And if you don't have things in life that force you to do it, you'll just sit there and be comfortable in a horrible situation. I don't care if it's jobs, marriage, whatever. And so now when I see those storms coming in my life, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm ready for this, because that means there's about to be a transformation. Something's about to change.
That is so true. Because I think about your story and my transformation. Same thing. I went through, after getting the degree, making good money, got laid off. Like, this isn't it. Could have got another career doing the same thing, but it just didn't feel right anymore. It wasn't the right path for me. So doing that soul searching, like, what are you going to do? Right. And it forces you. Either you're going to leave, life is going to deal with you, or you're going to deal with it. So you can't avoid it. When the storm.
You can't stop living out your purpose. That's the thing, right? Like, we think everything happens for a reason. I'm a firm believer in that. And I think people think we control stuff. I believe, yes, you should have goals and you should have that other stuff. But I'm just also a firm believer in going with life's flow, because it's going to take you there, whether you kicking and screaming or not. There's plenty of times as a woman of faith that I have fought with and wrestled with God about what I wanted to do versus what God had for me and what I needed to do. And what I've always learned, and this is the wisdom comes with getting older, is that, what he has for you is always bigger and better than what you could even dream for yourself.
Absolutely. Amen to that.
And so when I've started to just step into that flow, I realized I don't fight it anymore. Even in 2019, I took a sabbatical because I was like, I don't know where I'm going. I've hit some really, troubling waters. And I just thought, I'm going to move back to the Bay Area. I had never planned on being gone that long from, moving in 2009. I thought I'd be right back after grad school. But as I started to try to move to the Bay Area, it was not happening. And then I ended up back in Minneapolis to take care of my parents during COVID, which I thought would just be for a few months. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like the world changed. And then I was mad with God for a little bit. Like, why have you forsaken me? Why am I back? Not that I don't love Minneapolis. I love Minneapolis, but it was just like to my family and things like, sometimes I'm still always 16 and I don't feel like they realize the grown ass woman that I actually am.
Trust me, I know. I know.
Raised, you know how it is. And so it's like, it's just more about family dynamics and other things. But I was like, and that, the work that I've been doing is not known for tech policy, or whatever. So I'm thinking like, is this where I really want to, or venture capital? Is this where I'm supposed to be? But then, who could have foreseen the long-term impact of COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Who could have foreseen that a whole global movement would be kicked off by the murder of George Floyd here in Minneapolis, right? Like at that moment when all of that started to happen, I was like, whoa, like I see you, God. I have work to do. I need to be here as a soldier. Like you put me and align me at the right place at the right time to do the work. Because at the end of the day, that is who I am. I'm a soldier in these streets to make powerful economic change and create generational wealth in our community and rebuild and like just really give hope to people and inspiration around what's possible by connecting these systems, these barriers that have existed, and like literally, some people talk about breaking the glass and breaking even, glass ceilings, cement ceilings, mirrored ceilings, whatever you want to call it. But I'm I'm like that first one in, right? Like, I go in and like take out some stuff. And I feel like you can do more taking it out within the system versus fighting it necessarily from the outside. And so, I move stealthily, I get into stuff and like make it pop. And so I realized once I saw the impact of his death on the world, and that's where I just, you got to honor God, and you're like, okay, I see what you're doing here. Like you set stages for things, and these are just unprecedented times. So even if you're not a person of faith, I'm not, whoever you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, you better be paying attention because it is very powerful, right? And then that's just where I am with it. So I am content. I know that I'm supposed to be in Minneapolis right now and have now, purchased a home, a multi-generational home for my parents to live with me, with my kids, so that I can protect everybody and love on them while we get through this, because we still don't know where this is going to go. And just because, Biden and Kamala are in office, and just because a vaccine is out, people are what we saw on January 6th and what we're still seeing. There's a shift that has happened, and some things that I think that are still yet to reveal themselves.
Recording. All right. So, there's that old saying, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right?
Right.
and,
That's one of my favorites.
And then one of my because I do a radio show called Let's Talk About It on God's Radio 1 with a few other black gentlemen, and one of my co-host Mike, he often says, sometimes you have to get in alignment, right, with whatever your spiritual faith or being is, and when you get into alignment by surrendering and being in a mental gratitude of being a servant, then everything will happen for you the way it's supposed to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm totally in agreement with that. And even if you're not a spiritual person, you're listening to this, like you said, these are unprecedented times. So just the fact that you need to have some type of awareness and stillness just to take this in. This is not just business as usual, another thing as usual. Like this is take a pause and reflect of what's going on in life right now. I'll just add to
that and take a pause and look back at your life. I don't care who you are. There are so many times when we look, if we just really pay attention, our life is a series of millions of miracles all the time. Yes. Some are bigger than others, but I promise you, and because it's so funny how many people I talk to, and this is still the journalist in me, I guess. I love hearing people's stories because it says so much. You get to, and you can see the God moving and that work woven through all of those trials and tribulations and the whatever. And it doesn't matter how horrible your story is or how amazing your story is. It's just, I think it's like there's that one, I think I saw it as a meme somewhere, like how many millions of hundreds of ancestors had to have certain things happen in order to even create you, and like that moment, like in coming together through the years and like the things and the perfectness, because actually having a baby itself is such an amazing miracle, right? Like, because there's so many people who will tell you who can't have kids. If you really talk about that just alone, so just you existing is such a miracle, and surviving childbirth, because that's not no punk stuff either, right? That'll set you straight. But anyway, my point is that I'm an imperfect human, so I don't ever want to be like, I'm so perfect, but I am.
We all are.
Right. But I am trying to align more and more with God and my purpose every day. That's like my goal every day, is get closer to that.
It's funny that you mentioned ancestors, because when you were telling your story and of being back in Minneapolis, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, like her ancestors must be proud, because you are who your ancestors have prayed for, because they couldn't do the things you do. So they are praying for you to do the things that they couldn't do. And look at you going there and doing the things that your ancestors wish they could have done or prayed that could happen for.
Let me tell you something. How many times I've almost died, okay? I'm talking about in the last year, okay? I got in a horrible accident on a highway and hitting some black ice, on Easter in 2020, right? And the fact that I made it out of that and not a scrape on me, and and then even just as early as I think it was New Year's Day of this year, I went sledding with my kids and hit a tree. And my head was like getting ready to just like hit that tree. Don't even ask me why we're sledding anywhere near trees, but I'm not even gonna talk about that. But the point of it is I literally, something told me like put my arm up at the very last minute, and thankfully the cushion in my coat in my arm, I put it up just in time that it was the barrier between my head smashing into that tree.
Wow.
Right. And so much so that evening, I just was bawling because I was so thankful. And I literally told a friend of mine, it was nothing but God, the angels, and my ancestors that were like, it's not your time to go. Because, and another friend of mine who was like, "You trying to go out like a celebrity? Like, you know how many celebrities have gotten killed in skiing and sledding accidents? Like, what were you doing?" I don't know, but I don't even, because I don't even know. I think I haven't gone sledding in like 20 something years, but
Yeah.
whatever. Every time I try to take myself out, those ancestors come through for a sister. I will tell you that.
We ain't done with you yet, sis. We ain't done. We got some more work to do.
Right, exactly.
So, something that you alluded to, we dropped nuggets of history in there. History's in the making. We got HU vice president. And I know you watched the inauguration. Yeah. I know you watched the inauguration. I know it had me teary eyed as a black man raising a queen, a black queen. What was that like for you? Like, what was that moment in history like, and what were your feelings when you watched it happen? And let's not forget young Amanda Gorman. Whoo!
She did that, right? Oh my God. And she was just glowing, like the sun was out, as cold as it was. As they talked about that day, that was such a magical, and that's another one, right? Like, if you wish you could have been there, but actually probably not, because you wouldn't have been able to see it and hear it the same way. But I got, like many people, I got very emotional watching Kamala take her oath, because I really went through a depression last year watching her once it was announced with her vice presidency, and even when she ran as president, how people really came for her, whether it was her not being black enough, whether or not, whatever their issue, because at the end of the day, none of us are perfect, right? So I'm not saying that anybody is perfect or whatever, but sometimes it just breaks my heart to really see how black women are treated in general, right? But then when it became that she was going to be on the ticket with Biden, and the way that folks came for her was worse than they even came for Hillary, right? And it just really crushed me for a little bit. Like, we are still not where we need to be, and how our country treats black women. And so for me, for her to have that moment, and also it was a moment for women. It was a moment that she's bringing with her the power of going to a historically black college that I think is undervalued so much in that experience, because people would even talk about her confidence, right? And that she was arrogant versus so respectful when people were being disrespectful to her. I'm speaking. That's all she said, was like, I'm speaking. And there was... so that culmination of seeing her, and I loved, of course, the whole virtual fist bump between her and Michelle or whatever, but her giving that oath made me very emotional, because not just what it meant to me, but when we've talked about a lot about imagery, what it means to so many children of color, to see somebody that looks like them and that what's possible. I can't wait to see, because now my kids have had a black male president, a black female vice president in their lifetime. So my hope is that they never think that anything is impossible or unobtainable, and that they don't have the same barriers mentally, those mental chains that so many of us have had in our lifetime.
Yeah, because I remember in my lifetime, when they said you could be anything when you grow up, that excluded, we can't be president, we can't be vice president, but there's a lot of other things we could do. But now to see both of those happen, and I'm looking at my baby girl and I'm in tears, because the black woman, especially Amanda Gorman's speech, the black woman, I realize I always knew this, but even more so as we start to see this unfold, is the most unappreciated, disrespected human being on American soil. And I when I do these fights for equality and equity, I do it from a Black woman lens because I see it more as I raised my Black queen, and I realize my imperfections of where I was ignorant to some things, and working on myself in that process, and I saw young Amanda Gorman, and I'm like, wow, look at this Black queen at a time when America needs healing. She is providing America with the words to soothe America and get us into a place of healing. This is a young Black woman putting the world on her shoulders, saying, come here, boo, I got you. We gonna
and
get
the pressure
to this
behind that, but she came through like a champ, like it blew everybody away. You know what I mean? And stole the show.
and I start to think about our ancestors that because when she reminded me of a Maya Angelou.
Absolutely.
And then the ancestors that came before Maya Angelou, and I think about the Black women who have held down, from slavery to now, two sets of families, white families and Black families, communities, that we need to put some more respect on the Black woman's name.
Absolutely, because we've been expected to be these like magical Negroes that like can carry the world and not have. I was just talking to a dear friend of mine the other day who actually led Black engagement for the Biden-Harris campaign, and when you have given all that you have in you, right? Like, who's there to like replenish you? How are you, because we come in there and we like try to save the world in everything, in every aspect of what we do. And that's just insane to me. Right. And I that's why I really try to love on my community of Black women best that I can, and continue to try to shine a light on our value and our gifts, and really what we've done, and really lift us up. Because at the end of the day, like when you solve for the issues surrounding Black women in this country, you solve for everybody. Because we are at the bottom of the totem pole. We are the most mistreated. Really what you're referring to is that Malcolm X quote, right? And when we solve for that in every aspect around employment, healthcare, what have you, then, because even now, Black women are the fastest growing entrepreneurial group, right?
Yes.
In the country. But at the same time, we still have the least amount of resources. The least. There's so much, billions of dollars spent in venture capital, and Black women get less than 1% of that money. Less than 1%. You know what I mean? You can't even give us that. I find it crazy. There's so many studies. Catherine Finney, who I greatly admire, who did a lot of studies through Project Diane reports, through her organization Digital Undivided, really shed a light on how in the early, and it's only been a few years of the study, but it's changed just a little. But the average failing and unsuccessful white male tech startup receives $1.2 million, right? Failing. But the average successful Black female tech startup receives an average of around, and it's fluctuated between like 40 to 50,000 through the years. And maybe this year we'll see a huge spike in that, because there's been, everyone now wants a Black woman doing something, but they're still not giving us access to capital and resources and support, and even social capital the same way.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I totally
it's a
agree.
lot of tokenism happening right now, and we'll see if it's just how much it's continued or sustained moving forward.
Yeah, me and my co-host from God's Radio 1, we had a heated Clubhouse conversation about this, about how Black women entrepreneurs are, the from all studies, the highest ranking, new entrepreneurs and developers, business developers, and so forth. But they're not getting the capital and access to capital as they should. But they're still making things work. Without it, how come we're not paying attention to this and pouring into it in the rate that we should, right? And it was a very heated conversation. I'm not going to hash it out here, but it shows we still have a lot of work to do, which is why you being CEO of Women's Venture is so important, right? No pun intended.
Brand new. I'm not even full time yet. Like not hot off the press.
Hot off the press. So let's go back into the career journey a little bit, because I want to give some more nuggets to folks. Getting to this place fresh off the press and going through that transition, what were some of the steps that you took to get into your career in business, that you would say? So if I'm a young woman who's listening right now and I'm inspired by your journey, and I was like, you know what, I want to create something that is helpful, a business that's helpful, that impacts women of color. Well, what would you say are the steps you took to get into your career in business that you can kind of, share?
It's always a great question. And I don't know if you should follow me, because I live a very fearless, a fearless life that is not bound by anything in particular. I can't say, I did always have like 5-year plans and things like that, but I never was somebody who was like, I've got to do this by this date or, whatever. Because as an innovator, there's no blueprint, right? And there's no, as one mentor said, you're also creating language. You're helping people figure out what's inside your head, because those concepts don't exist yet. Mm-hmm. I had a dear friend refer to me as like the Black female Da Vinci, because that people don't appreciate you now, but they'll appreciate you once you're gone, because so many of your concepts are just too far ahead for people to understand. And therefore, people want you to slow down and dim your light to just help them like keep up with you. But anyway, so first and foremost, I would say to any young person is don't ever dim your light. Don't stop being who you are. Continue to be authentic and lean into that. Even though people might tell you, don't be curious or you're asking dumb questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question, right? Mm-hmm. That what you're unlocking and what you're inquiring about could really change the world. And I think at the end of the day, one of my favorite movies, and a lot of my favorite movies are kids movies, but is the movie Robots, which maybe since you have a little one you've seen. Mm-hmm. And it's really about entrepreneurship and around innovation. And there's a line in there that talks about see a need, fill a need, right? And that's the most basic concept to me of entrepreneurship is that you see a need and you fill it. And if you're noticing that, well, wait a minute, I've noticed that there isn't anything that like a problem that you have, probably a bunch of other people have. But the difference is who actually is going to implement it and take the time to research it and figure it out and become the subject matter expert on that thing. People think that whether it's investors or whoever, that they are funding an idea. That's not actually what they're funding. What they're funding is, are you the person that can get it done? Are you and that team the people that can get it done? Because that's why investors tend to invest in the same teams over and over again, no matter what the concept is, because they know that team is a team of implementers, right? Mm-hmm. They can have a great idea, but it's about the execution of it. Mm-hmm. So be somebody, that is not only can have the great ideas, but can be, create phenomenal implementation and execution of a concept from start to finish.
I love that. What's one good lesson life has taught you?
Oh my God, that's such a power. I have so many.
Just give me one.
Well, I'm gonna give you one though. Because this is the thing I think I tell people the most is be patient with your process. We're so ready, and I'm like the queen of impatience. But I remember my dad told me when I was young I was impatient. And so And I didn't really understand that until as I've gotten older, that even as I talked about my sabbatical, over the end of 2019 and going into 2020, people would say, well, what are you going to do next? What's about to happen? And I'm like, I'm just waiting for my marching orders, from God. And because I've learned now, by now, in my mid 40s, just sit tight. But I think when we're going through things, when we're going through our storms, whatever, we're impatient with ourselves and don't show ourselves even enough grace and understanding and love, right? Like our self-talk isn't healthy and healing. And instead of, I'm going through this, and there are lessons to be learned because I'm being reshaped for my purpose. And I have to go through this. I have to go through this storm. So if I ever write a book, whether it's the title,
not if, when,
right.
you write your book.
Maybe it'll be a chapter of a book. I don't know, but it will be about be patient with the process.
Yeah, and one of my friends used to say, I'm in love with the process because the journey is where it's at.
Right. Well, the funny thing is that statement came from, I had a young woman that was in my graduate school cohort who was younger than me. And she's like, it's like you always say. And I was like, well, first of all, I was thinking, what do I always say? Because sometimes people got to tell, you got to play back the tape. Somebody's got to tell you. And she was like, it's like you always say, be patient with the process. And that's when I realized I didn't even recall ever saying that. But she said I said it all the time. And so once she said it back to me, I was like, okay, that's my mantra. Be patient with the process, because it's very true. And I have been through so many trials and tribulations that I rarely talk about, not because I won't, it's just because I just haven't. And maybe that is the book. But it is those are the very things that have shaped me. And even back to what we talked about, thank you, Clear Channel, thank you, and so when I look at everything that has happened in life, I go back and I instead of having a spirit of bitterness or regret or whatever, I thank Clear Channel, I thank my ex-husband, I thank my haters, I thank people who have tried to knock me off of my trajectory in different ways, because what they didn't realize is they were actually knocking me to the right trajectory. Thank you.
Yeah.
So.
I agree. And I do think you got like 2 or 3 books in you, just so you know.
Probably so.
So what's some advice you would give to someone? Let's say I'm at my dead end job. I'm inspired by this, and I know this is not the thing for me. Or I just got let go. COVID has had an impact on me, and now it's forced me to sit that I'm not living in my purpose. And I'm inspired by this episode, and I hear you, and I want to start a career in your industry now because it's something that I've always been thinking about. What's some advice you would give to that person?
Well, my industry is industry agnostic, right? Because entrepreneurship is in every aspect of what we do. And as the advice that I give is, and this even kind of goes back to the other question that you gave about what I tell young people, is pay attention to what you physically lean into. If there's a conversation, a topic, or something that, you're like sitting back in your chair, with your friends or whatever, and you're kind of like just in a non-active posture. But then there's certain things that come up and you just you physically get into it. Like you literally lean in, you start, your passion starts to come out in your language and your tone and things like that. Pay attention to that, because that's what you need to be involved in. As a researcher, we learn that because you get so steeped in a particular topic that you got to really love that. And it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. You got to really love it, and you got to be a subject matter expert at whatever it is. And so how deep do you want to go into something? So if it's something that you can go down rabbit holes with and still bring yourself back up and kind of, be interested in all the competitors and understanding that whole concept, and it doesn't bore you, then that's what you need to be doing. And
Mm-hmm.
what I would say to those, particularly right now, who have been negatively impacted by what's happening in our world, is that there's still hope, though, right? And that every day is a new day to start toward and continue toward your purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
like, look around you and see what those lessons are that you're gleaning from this, and use it as an opportunity to say, well, wait a minute now, I can use my unemployment maybe to give me the space
Mm-hmm.
to think about an idea. I mean, one of the things that COVID has afforded us, the positive side, is it's made us take a step back, because some of our demands of just sitting at home by ourselves and getting to know ourselves better, has forced us to pay attention to our self-care, has forced us to be alone with our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
read some books that we haven't read, watch some
Mm-hmm.
things, listen to some podcasts, giving us some time and space, because we're not commuting the same way,
Yeah.
to explore and be curious. And, I think every time that I've had that, when I was laid off, I was so busy worrying about survival that I
Mm-hmm.
missed the opportunity that life was affording me in that moment to take a pause. And so, as they've talked about, this has been the great pause, right?
Yeah.
Um, in the world. So use this great pause to look inward and get some, be introspective and reflect around what really moves you, what makes you passionate, what mark do you want to leave on the world, and what gifts do you have to give to the world.
I love that.
Yeah, because I remember calling my mom when I lost that job at Clear Channel and crying. And I was, early 30s. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, I don't know what's next for me, because I don't know what I'm good at. Like, I was good at selling, I'm good at this, but I just really, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And I don't know what's next. And my
Mm-hmm.
mom said to me, the thing about you, Erin, is that you remind me of this book. She's into sci-fi, about the Prince of Wales or something like that. I still have yet to read this book. I need to figure out what book it is, because this is now 20 years, or 15
Mm-hmm.
years later. But anyway, and she says, in that book, the prince realizes that his gift is helping others to identify their gifts. And
Mm.
I thought, that's exactly what I'm good at. I'm, I used to think, well, I'm not a singer. I don't have, I'm not an artist. I can't build, whatever. But what I've learned from that moment of that pause in my life is that my gift was helping and is helping other people identify those gifts. And more importantly, what I've learned since then, help them monetize those gifts and turn it into a business, and things that language, and we talked about this in the beginning, is that a lot of people don't even see themselves as entrepreneurs. They might see themselves as side hustlers. They might see themselves as somebody who's really good at a thing,
Mm-hmm.
but they haven't figured out how to connect those dots.
Mm-hmm.
So identify what your gifts are, and then more importantly, figure out the value to it and how you can use that to your benefit.
I love that. I love that. So, what do you think the future has in store for, particularly women of color, in business, small business, startups, entrepreneurship? What does that look like? What do you think the future has in store?
You all haven't seen nothing yet. It's about to be like, this whole world is about to be rocked by just like this major movement that's getting ready to come. And it's already happening, right? Because now these the floodgates have kind of opened in a way. I love our younger people in the level of empowerment that they have, where they don't mind giving the finger to um, traditional structures of, do I need to go to college and, assume all of that debt? Nah. And then, or do I need to, I can create a whole business by being, a content creator and things like that. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like all of the creative energy that is in our world right now and is being encouraged and released is something that, if I had had these tools you know, when I was younger, Lord knows what I would have possibly done. But that's okay, right? Because really, again, I realize my purpose is to help empower those individuals to see that in themselves. And so I think that we're going to see some amazing products, services, businesses come out of women of color, entrepreneurs in the future. I think that leading the organization, to give a plug to Women Venture, the whole reason I stepped into this role is it's an opportunity. It's not just we're a women's business center and entrepreneurship, you know, center, but we're also a CDFI and we fund. But I want us to lean more into our name and get more into venture capital, get more into tapping into different niche communities within even our female community that have not really been empowered to be entrepreneurs or think of themselves as entrepreneurs in the same way, whether that's as in the technology space, whether that's as creatives, because a lot of people don't see creatives as entrepreneurs, and they absolutely are, and giving them the skills to do that. Whatever those different things are, and I think that we're going to start seeing some amazing trends happen that will blow our minds.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I can't wait.
I can't wait too, and you know, I know you're supporting the women, and this is you guys are doing this together. But I could totally say if there's anything I could be an ally and support, I'm totally down.
Thank you, and vice versa, right? Like it's about rebuilding our communities together.
Yeah.
That's just the chunk I'm taking off and trying to work on in particular, because we can't do everything all at the same time. We need as many soldiers and allies and partners as possible to lift us all up.
Absolutely. So, you know, me and you could probably talk for hours, but we got to end it somewhere. I want people to get in their 50-minute drive time, some good knowledge. So let's leave the people with this. What projects are you currently working on, and where can people find you?
So I just, as of a couple weeks ago, accepted the role of CEO of Women Venture, which is a venture capital, women's entrepreneurship center, and economic development firm in the Twin Cities that is preparing to scale nationally. So we're about to do some amazing things. So you can find me at womenventure.org. I'm also the founder of Black Female Founders. And you can find me at blackfemalefounders.org and all of the socials related to those. And then also just on my own socials, you know, very active on LinkedIn, but just most of my socials are Erin H. McKinney. And so I'm always doing some hotness. The one other hotness that I am doing right now that I forgot to mention is connecting all of that, because I still have my entrepreneurial endeavors. And I'm also the managing partner of a real estate firm called Minnesota Impact Partners, and that's to help with the redevelopment efforts and economic development efforts in communities of color in Minnesota post George Floyd's murder.
Nice. Love that. And then I'm gonna make sure that I get all the links to all that and put it in the show notes. So if you want to connect with her on any of those, you'll see it in the show notes. And then one last thing to end us off with, I was looking at a personal quote that you have here. I strongly believe that our survival instincts are what sparks innovation. Be unapologetic about your testimony and your path. We must be patient with our personal journey and process, because one's purpose is often shaped by the trials of life and are what will ultimately define you. What does that quote mean to you when you hear me say it back to you?
One, that it's long and I need to work on making that more succinct. but the other thing is that at the end of the day, true innovation comes out of survival. And I think that when people are met with life's trials, they innovate because they're forced to, they have to. And so that goes back to what I've talked a lot about today, which is about being embracing those storms in your life, because something amazing, some miracle is about to happen, some lesson you're about to learn from, whether it's that failure, or trial or what have you. And it's going to allow you to innovate in your life in a way. And again, innovation isn't about technology necessarily. It's about doing something better, doing something more amazing, finding a way to get over an obstacle that is in your way. And when we look at and embrace life's obstacles and find a way to work around them, think about the feeling you have when you achieve something that was so difficult. And you can look back at yourself or look in the mirror and be like, yo, you did that, right? Like gold star for you. Doesn't matter what everybody else says or thinks. A lot of people won't even know the trials that you've been through. But when I look at the mirror and I look at where I've innovated and pivoted in my life, it's been in those moments. And I'm proud of me for that. And people need to be proud of themselves for what they've gone through, and be authentic and embrace that, and all of the intersectionality in their identities that get them to a point that they can, that makes you who you are. And when you own your truth, that's some powerful stuff right there. So own it, be you. Don't be anybody else.
Don't be anybody else. Own your truth. Stand within your power. Erin Horne McKinney, it's been an honor and pleasure to have you on the show today. You're a true conduit to the Black community. You are who our ancestors have prayed for. And thank you so much for just dropping so much knowledge and wisdom with us today. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's been another episode of Raspreneurs. I will be staying in touch with this young lady because I do not want to miss out on everything she's doing. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you on another episode.